California's presidential election history since World War II. If you look at the state in modern times, you probably have one picture of how the state votes. However, it has not been this way in California forever at all. In fact, since the Second World War, California had much more often voted Republican for president until the 90s changed everything. Our goal here is simple: to walk you through the election results for each contest starting in 1948. And in 1948, the incumbent president was Harry Truman. Following many years of leadership by Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the late president had died, and Truman took over early into what would have been his fourth term. The result was a nail-biter as Truman defeated Republican Tom Dewey by less than half a point, taking California's 25 electoral votes and with it, the election. An independent progressive, Henry Wallace, took under 5% of the vote. Dewey was considered a strong favorite heading into the 1948 election, so Truman's victory was regarded as an upset. You all remember the photos of the newspaper saying Dewey defeats Truman? Well, it didn't happen. Had Dewey won California, however, Truman still would have ultimately won the election, which was the fifth victory in a row for the Democrats. And now we will help you visualize these counties and how they voted. The counties in a shade of purple were close, while those bluer or redder went respectively towards the Democrats or Republicans. Los Angeles and San Francisco were among the purple counties, something which would be a shock today. The GOP were strongest in the Bay Area suburbs and in Orange County. However, 1952 was a different story. Behind World War II hero Dwight Eisenhower, the Republicans would win their first presidential election since 1928. California jumped up from 25 to 32 electoral votes, and Eisenhower got them all, taking California decisively over Adlai Stevenson. Virtually every county in the state went for Ike as he won the national election in a landslide. One of California's U.S. Senators, Richard Nixon, was Eisenhower's running mate. He'll be important again later in this video. There was a large jump in the number of people who voted in California in this election, growing quickly as it was, and it would not be the last time either. As for how the candidates did in each, there were not many areas where Stevenson did well. Solano County in the Bay Area, as well as a few others in northeastern California, were strongholds. However, there were far more Eisenhower strongholds on the map. Southern California was rock solid red for the Republican for the most part. This would also be the case in 1956 as Eisenhower won the rematch with Adlai Stevenson. The race was slightly closer the second time, but the result was not in doubt, as Ike won a second term with Nixon as his running mate. Nationally, Eisenhower got 457 electoral votes. Eisenhower became the first candidate to get over 3 million votes in the Golden State. Looking at the Bay Area, you can make out that both San Francisco and Alameda County are both red. Take a screenshot of that because as of 2026, that has never happened since in either place. In fact, a Republican carrying San Francisco would probably be seen as an extinction level event for Democrats, just to give you an idea of how these places have shifted over time. Stevenson pulled a little more support in Fresno County and its surrounding areas, but otherwise, it was another solid win for Eisenhower in Southern California. Fast forward 4 years, and now Vice President Richard Nixon of California was the GOP nominee. He ran against a man whose name you might recognize, John F. Kennedy, the Democrat. Kennedy won that election in 1960, but Nixon carried his home state in a close contest. Very close, in fact, as Nixon won California by only about 36,000 votes. His home state supported him, but it was Illinois which would ultimately do Nixon in back in 1960. However, we all know that this was not the last of him on the national stage. Many counties in the state were in the purple range, meaning the margins of victory for either candidate was in the single digits. Los Angeles and Ventura County went bluer, but other SoCal counties like Orange, Riverside, Santa Barbara, and San Diego remained in the pockets of the GOP. Marin County, to the north of San Francisco, also remained a reliable red county, another sign of how things have changed in California. Of course, we all know of Kennedy's tragic story. He lost his life in Texas in 1963, and Lyndon Johnson became the 36th president of the United States. Johnson had less than a year to mount his campaign, and in his only general election as the presidential nominee, he won both California and the nation in a landslide. Johnson faced arch-conservative Senator Barry Goldwater, who was no match for LBJ in the election campaign. In the end, Johnson took 59% in California, which now shot up to 40 electoral votes. LBJ's popular vote margin in California was about 1.3 million votes, and Goldwater clung on to just a handful of reliably red counties in his loss, like Orange. In fact, Orange was really one of the only counties to give Goldwater any sort of solid backing at all, outside of less populated ones such as Alpine and Mono. Johnson won many of California's counties comfortably, including in Southern California, which had been good to the GOP in recent past elections. While that 1964 landslide for the Democrats might look more like something you'd see today, it was very much an aberration at that point in American history. When the 1968 election came, Richard Nixon was back on the ballot, and California once again turned red. He won his home state by a wider margin than in 1960, but got a lower vote share. However, he did win the election nationally, even as American independent George Wallace of Alabama snatched some electoral votes. None in California, though. Had Nixon lost California to Hubert Humphrey, the election would have gone to the U.S. House. Southern California came back into the fold for the GOP, though Los Angeles is more purple than it was in the 1950s. Orange County and San Diego did a lot of the heavy lifting there. The Bay Area was beginning its slow migration into a Democratic bastion, though it would take quite a bit longer for that to manifest itself. Further, some parts of the interior of Northern California continued to vote Democratic. As for Wallace, his 6.7% of the vote was considered a good showing. He did not get under 4% in any county, but he did not get above 14 either, even in his best ones. His stronger counties were generally not on the coast. President Nixon rode high into the 1972 presidential election. Things didn't go too well after it, but during it, sure. California, by the way, now had 45 electoral votes. The GOP turned back the clock to the 1950s, with Nixon winning the state in an election which might have looked very reminiscent of what his former running mate, Dwight Eisenhower, did in 1952 and 1956. George McGovern lost to Nixon in an historic rout, and California was not immune to the red tide. Even at that, McGovern still did better here than in many other states, seeing as he lost 49 of them. Nixon would win the state by over 1.1 million votes, and was the first Republican to get 4 million votes in the state. Southern California was ruby red for the most part, while McGovern fought some counties to nearly a draw, but not nearly enough to make it interesting. He struggled in some of what were at the time ancestrally Democratic counties in Northern California. Much of the Bay Area outside of San Francisco and Alameda was red. Between this election and the next, however, America saw a lot of change. The Vietnam War officially ended in 1975, but Nixon was not president when it happened. This is because he resigned in 1974 in the midst of a very likely Watergate impeachment, leaving the presidency to Gerald Ford, who himself replaced Spiro Agnew and hadn't been vice president for long. Some say that Ford pardoning Nixon cost him the 1976 election, but it did not cost him California. Though Jimmy Carter would win the presidency, he lost a close race to Ford in the Golden State. Ford won by less than 2 points. The map had much more blue than in 1972, but not enough for Carter to win. Orange County was still reliably red, for now, but there were a lot of close counties. Note that areas of the interior are still fairly blue as of 1976, while Greater LA and parts of the suburban Bay Area are red. Take a picture, it'll last longer. Jimmy Carter's 4 years as president were eventful, but probably not in ways he would have liked. Between the Iran hostage crisis, the oil embargo, and what the president himself described as economic malaise, he had a rough term. So, when the 1980 election came around, it was Ronald Reagan's turn on the GOP side, and he'd win in a landslide. His home state of California came through for him as well, and in a big way. Reagan won all but 3 counties in the state, clustered up in the Bay Area. He crushed Carter by 17 points to win California's 45 electoral votes. The president received just 36%, while an independent, John Anderson, claimed 7%. Most areas of California were red enough, including parts of the Bay Area and much of greater Los Angeles. The interior parts of the state, which were once blue, were beginning to realign towards the GOP. Yet, there was also an independent, John Anderson. He had his strongest numbers along the coast. coast. Anderson got at least 4% in every county in California, while clearing double digits in 11 of them. His best was Santa Clara at 14%. Republicans ran it back with Reagan in 1984, and once more, the home state candidate won. His 1984 landslide was among the largest in history, in which he won 525 electoral votes. The election was long over by the time the polls closed in California, but the president carried it by 16 points anyway. However, there was a slightly larger patch of blue counties in the Bay Area. You may not realize it now, but what you are seeing on the map is the start of California's political realignment. Earlier in this video, you saw that plenty of interior counties were blue and the coast was red. Marin County, San Mateo County, and Santa Cruz County were all red as well. Even San Francisco voted for Eisenhower twice. However, here in the 1980s, you can see the beginning of that shift. The interior is becoming red, and the much more heavily populated coast is turning blue, even if just a slow drip. This bloom of blue counties starts up in the Bay Area and, not to spoil it, will eventually overspread the state. It may take another decade or two, but it will get there. Reagan could not seek a third term in 1988, so his vice president, George H.W. Bush, ran himself. Bush went on to win what some dubbed Reagan's third term. He defeated Massachusetts Governor Michael Dukakis in an electoral rout. This was the third presidential victory in a row for the Republicans. Like Reagan, Bush won California, but it looked nothing like Reagan's victories. Though a close race, Bush defeated Dukakis by about 3.5 points. Spoiler alert, as of 2026, the GOP has not won in California since. Bush didn't need California to win in 1988, and his son lost it twice in 2000 and 2004, but he didn't need those electoral votes either. Remember that bloom of blue counties on the coast I mentioned? It grew in 1988, spreading up from the Bay Area, while LA County also flipped to the Democrats. Meanwhile, the interior is getting redder. California's flip to the Democrats was inevitable, given that the coast is where the population is. In 1992, it flipped. Bill Clinton defeated George Bush to win the presidency, and he snatched California's 54 electoral votes in the process. 1992 was most interesting because it was a competitive three-way race, thanks also to Ross Perot. Clinton won the state with a plurality of the vote as a result. Perot carried one county, Trinity. Bush carried a bunch in the interior, but the coast was basically all Clinton. California's political realignment was well underway, and a state that the GOP could count on in the past wasn't reliable anymore. The coast was looking mighty blue, while Bush struggled to run up big margins anywhere in the Golden State. As for Ross Perot, Trinity was his best county, but he had some other strong showings in the interior of the state. 1996 would be different in that Perot would get less of the vote this time, and he was now running under the Reform Party banner. The end result, however, was the same. Bill Clinton won big, beating Republican Bob Dole while en route to re-election. Clinton cleared 50% in a three-person race, with Perot falling well backwards to under 7%. Many counties in the interior of the state continued their drift towards the GOP, while the more populous counties on the coast did the opposite. Los Angeles and the Bay Area continued their move towards the Democrats, but for now, Orange County held out as one of the Republicans' bastions. 2000 was one of the closest elections in modern American history. While the electoral vote came down to a knife's edge between George W. Bush and Al Gore, California wasn't as divided. Gore won California by about 12 points and took the state's 54 electoral votes. For the Democrats, it was their third win in a row here. Victorious Republican candidates for the presidency used to be able to count on the Golden State, but over the course of the 1990s, it would get bluer. Now, they did recall their Democratic governor and install Arnold Schwarzenegger a few years later, but that's neither here nor there. California, as of 2000, is not yet as blue as it will soon become, but over the past 20 years, from Reagan to Bush 43, it has become a moderately blue state. A lot of that is thanks to the continued progression of blue intensity on the coast. At this point, almost everything north of San Luis Obispo is Democratic. Southern California was still mostly red for now, outside of Los Angeles County, but that's a rather big county to lose and difficult for a Republican to overcome. The younger Bush, unlike his father, was re-elected. That year was 2004, and Bush defeated Massachusetts Senator John Kerry after an eventful first term, which saw, amongst other things, 9/11 and the Iraq War. However, Kerry made it 4 Democratic Democratic wins in a row in California. During that campaign, there were some whispers that California could be back in play, but that wasn't happening. As of 2026, this is the closest the Republicans have come to carrying the state in the period between 1992 and the present. Even at that, they were not very close. Bush lost the state by just under 10 points. The trends which started in the 1980s continued with a red interior and a blue coastline. This would become turbocharged starting with the next election. That was in 2008, with Democrat Barack Obama becoming the first African-American president. When Obama beat John McCain to take this state, it wasn't close at all. He beat the Republican in California by 24 points, a thorough rout. Obama was the first presidential candidate to receive 8 million votes in California. A number of counties which had voted Republican in 2004 went Democratic in 2008, including San Bernardino, Riverside, San Diego, and Fresno. For the first time, most Bay Area counties had turned dark blue. And to think, just 28 years earlier, Ronald Reagan did respectably in many of them. Those counties were officially gone for the GOP, and as yet, they have never come back. 2012 was not quite the rout of 2008, but Republican Mitt Romney only did marginally better than McCain. In the end, it was another big win for Obama as he won re-election to the presidency. He carried California by 23 points, a slight drop from 2008, but hardly noticeable in the big picture. 3 counties in Northern California flipped back to the GOP, but that's about it. Once again, Obama ran up the score in Los Angeles County and up the coast into Humboldt County. Let's talk about Orange County, though. For decades, it was the Republican county in the state. There were elections in which it was the reddest in all of California, even at its size. However, in 2008 and now 2012, the margins were thinning. Ronald Reagan won Orange by 50 points in 1984. George W. Bush even won it by 21 in his 2004 re-election run. However, Obama lost it in the single digits twice. Once we got to 2016, the Republican bastion had fallen. Donald Trump was elected to the presidency the first time, but Hillary Clinton won the state in a landslide. The first woman to win the Golden State, Clinton got about 62% of the vote. Trump got about 32%, while Libertarian Gary Johnson came in under 4% of the vote. The only remaining red county in Southern California was Kern, as Orange County was won by a Democrat for the first time since 1936. Losing Orange County was a symbolic blow for the GOP, a sign that they'd lost everywhere that mattered in California, but they won the White House anyway. The only red county along the coast was Del Norte, which is practically in southern Oregon. Everything else went blue, including some very dark blue counties in the Bay Area and including LA County. The worst for the GOP so far came in 2020 during the COVID pandemic. Trump lost the presidency to Democrat Joe Biden, and in California, he lost by a whopping 29 points. Biden received over 11 million votes in the state, by far the most any candidate had ever received. His running mate was home state Senator Kamala Harris, who would become America's first female vice president. Orange County went to Biden by 9 points, which is bad enough for the GOP, but up and down the map, this was a lousy election for them in the Golden State. Even Inyo County, a rural county along the Nevada border, went Democratic for the first time since 1964. Meanwhile, those dark blue counties from the past few elections still were. And finally, in the present day, the most recent election was in 2024. Donald Trump returned to the White House, but he lost California for a third time. In total, this was the Democrats' 9th win in a row in the Golden State. The Democratic nominee was Vice President Kamala Harris of San Francisco, who won her home state, but by a reduced margin from Biden 4 years earlier. Harris won by 20. Still a solid win, but a noticeable backslide. The state's blue counties were largely confined to the coast in 2024. With many interior blue counties flipping back to red. Orange County stayed blue, however, much to the dismay of the GOP that they might not get it back anytime soon. The blues were a little less dark in some major counties in 2024, and the red counties were more prominent in terms of area, but in the end, it was still a sizable Democratic victory in the state. And speaking of land area, I don't know who needs to hear this, but here is your reminder that land does not vote. You may have seen the 2024 map, which showed a lot more red counties, but a 20-point Democratic win. So let me reintroduce you to the concept of population density. On the screen, you have the most Democratic and Republican Republican counties from 2024 respectively. San Francisco City and County is 232 square miles, but has over 826,000 residents. Lassen County in Northeast California has about 20 times the area, but about 3% the population as San Francisco. There are neighborhoods in the city where Kamala Harris got more votes than Donald Trump did in all of Lassen County. So, the next time you see a lot of red on a map, but the Democrat wins, ask yourself how many people voted in those counties. To wrap this up, we want to show you some changes from the past to now. This first screen is how the counties have changed their voting habits since the first post-war election in 1948. Northeast California and Central Valley counties, which were once blue, are now much more red. Meanwhile, the coast has gotten a lot bluer. It's interesting to see this laid out, but one more graphic which might really tell the tale of California's political realignment is this one. What you're seeing now are the state's county shifts since 1980, when Ronald Reagan won his first term. Almost every county on the coast got significantly bluer. In fact, most counties in California got bluer, even some parts of the interior. Only a handful of counties got even redder since 1980, but most moved the other way. For example, Marin County got an astonishingly 74 points bluer since 1980. Reagan won it by 10, but Harris won it by 64. San Mateo, also in suburban San Francisco, was similar, getting 63 points bluer since 1980, going from Reagan plus 12 to Harris plus 50. Even Orange County got 48 points bluer in that time, going from Reagan plus 45 to Harris plus 3. Los Angeles was another high-profile shift. Reagan won it by 10 in 1980, but Kamala Harris won it by 33 in 2024. Unless the GOP does something about this, they will not win in California again anytime soon. The coast is solidly blue, and that's where most of the people live. The interior counties could shift 15 points redder, and it wouldn't matter if the coast votes the same. Those were California's elections since 1948.